anyone here totally new to NXDN or the concepts? Okay, great.
DMR.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, another digital radio. Hey, okay.
You never know, we might
If
be
you
able
don't
to
know where you came from, you don't know how you got to
DMR
NXDN.
Kool-Aid. Then we're going to do something on the next step.
I got some handouts here. It's just going to be a quick overview. If you need pens, I can give you pens. Just, something you can scribble notes on. We're going to start with general networking. We'll talk about NXDN, what it is. Just take a few handouts.
I actually brought it from home.
Yeah. You need pens, you want to scribble notes, let me know. I've got a box full of pens, you're welcome to them. Otherwise, someone else will get them, throw them out. I'll leave the pens up here if anybody wants them. Help yourself. Just so you got something out of this convention. Generally, first of all, just talk about NXDN. It's nothing new. The theory behind NXDN has been around for a long time. Frequency shift keying. That's all it is. You're taking one frequency and shifting it up or down to create O's and 1s. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. We take it, if we take the frequency and we shift it up 350 hertz, we have just created the digital 00. We go up another 1050, we created 01. That's all we're doing. So if the radio shifts up 00, 01, 10, 11. So you can create a bit stream just by shifting up and down. No different than Morse code, really, right? So Morse code, you shifted analog. Here we just shift frequency a little bit, and we have just created digital mode. So it's no big rocket science. It's not a affront to the existing ham community of analog. If it is, then all the FSK people out there should be offended too, because that's all we're doing is FSK. There's a bunch of technical specifications out there for it. I don't think you're going to be interested in it. Now the uses to take what we do is we take the voice, we sample it, we encode it. They use what's called an AMB-E2 +2 voice encoder. It's also used in Motorola uses it. Several other companies are using it. It's the same voice encoder. The biggest problem, the reason digital radios are high to get the license on that, the true license, not the overseas license, it runs you a couple $100. So a lot of the expensive equipment is just to get that. You can buy the dongle for what, 300, John?
Yeah, I got it out of DVSI for 300, and there's some dongles out there now with the chip for even less.
Right. So you can buy just the dongle and plug it in, and it'll take into your USB port. It'll take the audio in and give you AMB +2 decoding out, encoding out, or the other way around. So that dongle, as it gets more prolific, you're going to start seeing other people saying, "Hey, why don't I throw digital into my standard 2 meter?" No reason why not. Make it a digital, It'll be coming. The technology is what we call FDMA, frequency division. It's the same technology you're used to today. You're used to a frequency divided, this frequency is mine, this is mine, this is mine. All they have done is packed it down to 6.25. We've managed to narrow it down. About 20 plus years ago, 12.5 came in. They came up with finally the equipment was able to do 12.5 kilohertz deviation. Before that, you remember fine tuning in somebody and you'd let your receiver warm up and it would lock in and every once in a while you'd tweak it. Well, about the era, I'm going to say HT1000s are probably about 25 years old. If you get those, there's A, B, C, D series. If you get the C and D, the option came at that point to go 12.5. So 12.5's been around for at least 25 years. It's nothing new, it's old technology. It's been there. The FCC forced in 2013 the commercial world to go to 2.5, but it's been there. The reason we didn't have 6 1/4 at the time, equipment couldn't do it. You could not get radio equipment that stable at a price that could go out to the market and sell. I mean, you could buy lab equipment with that stability, so you could shift up 350 hertz, down 350, but you will be paying lab equipment prices. It had to get down to market level. At this point, what happens now, it has finally gotten down to market level. So now we can put a radio at 6 1/4, half a mile away, put another radio at a 6 1/4 transmitter, and they won't hear each other. Two mobiles will not hear each other. The average commercial radio from the big three, even Motorola, is down. You have at least 65 dB adjacent channel rejection on those radios, right? Where you look at on some of the radios, the older radios, or the Chinese knockoffs on some of these digital radios, our adjacent channel is 6 1/4, 65 dB at 12 and a half deviation. Their 65 dB is at 25. It doesn't put that in spec. All they put down is their adjacent channel. They don't tell you they're measuring that at 25. We're measuring it at 12. So that's why the complaint, some of the people who are currently in digital, some of their users may buy barn door radios, the cheap radios. Well, they're going to hear an analog machine 15 kilohertz off, because their specs are at 25, not at 15. And that's going to be a nightmare as we go forward, because how do you control what the user buys? They want the cheapest. And anyone who's taking those radios apart knows that chip inside that radio that they use is a standard wired home phone, what do they call those things, a cordless phone. The chip used inside most two-way radios is the same chip used in cordless phones. They just shift the frequencies. That's all it is. I dug into them and found out that's all it was. Everything else is just added on. The codec on there, we have what's called a codec rate, which is basically how much people will we transmit. Where that's interested to people is what sort of connection do I need. For networking computers on digital mode, you can probably get away from 19.2 dial-up. Worst case scenario. That's probably the minimum you would need. We've played with that at work. We run a lot of network digital now, and we very rarely see over 96 on our network for digital. Only when we access the computers, the actual radio, the radio has a built-in, we access it for programming, will we spike up, because then we're hard. But digital does not use up much bandwidth. Between each word you speak, that computer's sitting there idle doing nothing. Think about it. You got a computer that's rated in MIPS, millions of instructions per second, and you're pausing. That computer can sit there and do 1,000 things between each syllable you speak. So the bandwidth is very low. You can do it on dial-ups, even on standard. You can put up 2 dial-ups, set up a temporary network. As long as you have a phone, cell phone at the other end, boom, your network's up and running. Look at that. It does use what we call error correction too on these things. So when we send a packet, it's kind of like we send a packet, and then we send an answer. So error correction, basically, I send you 2 + 2 = 4, and I'm going to send you the number 4 again. Now your computer at the far end is going to say 2 + 2 should be 4, and it's going to get that answer, and it says, is it 4? And if it's not, it's going to say resend it. Or, and sometimes at forward error connection, we send enough information with it that it can say, oh, I think it should have been, and it'll correct it and continue on. What you'll notice in the new digital versus the old digital, if anyone's been, I wouldn't say unfortunate enough, but anyone who was brave enough to get into D-Star in your early stages, it kind of sounded like something, a Robbie robot, what was that, Lost in Space?
Yeah, the R2-D2 problem.
The R2-D2, yeah. It was kind of like R2-D2 with a pinched nose, right? That's how it sounded. Well, the quality wasn't there. Yes, you were getting communications across. Yes, if you came from a society that tends to speak in higher pitched voice than we do, it was perfectly intelligible. But for Western people who speak in low, mumbling tones, we ran into trouble with it. So, as we changed, the new vocoders came out, they went with that. You know, the digital market decided, well, let's go with the new ambient. And there's another one out now. I forget who makes it, supposed to be even better now. Have you heard that? I think Wires, Jesus wants to use that one.
Use Fusion.
Yeah, that's their answer to Wires. It didn't work, so we're going to try Fusion now. But they use an encoder that's supposed to be even better than Ambient 2, supposedly. And it's just based on the sampling rate of how fast you can sample and how many bits you want to sample off of it.
And supposedly they're very similar to P25, the original version,
Yeah.
phase one P25.
P20, okay.
Supposedly.
Yeah, we're also getting into the NXDN now is Alinco. I guess you've heard they're getting into the NXDN market. So it should be interesting to see how they perform. The advantages of NXDN. First of all, better channel efficiency. Yesterday, if you're in the NESMA meeting, they were talking about channel assignments, which is typically at 25 kilohertz. Right now, like when we went to 12, the first advantage of that was immediately we can in the same footprint of a 25, we can now sit two 12 kilohertz, 12.5 emitters in there. What they emit, we're not going to go into it this moment, but you can actually fit two into there. So you could, in the analog world, now you can have two 12 and a half where you had one. Advantage of that, you can have a site, if you're licensed for a site, you have another site, a satellite site a mile away, you can put them on separate transmitters still within your same footprint. Do a little RF engineering, you can put the same, under your same license, just go back, modify it for a second location. So you can have that in there. The equipment's cheaper. If for some of the stuff that uses TDMA, it's cheaper equipment. You only need to buy one box. You set it up. Now you've got two channels running at the same time. So it's cheaper out the door, kind of like a Yugo, cheaper out the door. So it does get you out the door quicker and cheaper. So people do like that, especially if you're trying to pinch corners and budgets. It's good to have something along that line. There's right now in existing TDMA, there's more offshore involvement. You can go offshore right now and buy a lot of radios. Go to Light in a Box, I think is one of them. Alibaba. Yeah, these are all.
Hytera.
Yeah, Hytera is a good one. Actually, one of the
This
better
is
ones.
Hytera.
Hytera.
T-Y-T-E-R-A.
Oh, they're a knockoff of
The
Hytera.
TYT.
Oh, well, I love it. I love it. Hytera's got a knockoff now.
Yeah.
The knockoff's got a knockoff going.
Yeah.
They're used out offshore, some of those. The manufacturers offshore now have gotten into that, and they can produce the equipment very cheap. And I saw several of their equipment out here with just branded from someone else's cardboard box. You buy 1,000 units from them, and they will brand it. But you go on Alibaba.com or you go on to lightinthebox.com, plug in UHF radio, and you can buy them how many you want. And they start about DMR, I think starts around DMR phase 2.
165 bucks.
Yeah, I think even lower than that on some of them now.
It's supposed to be coming up once for 120, but nobody's seen the radio yet.
Yeah. Well, you get onto their website, get onto the Chinese manufacturer's website, you may find them there already.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to be looking at people who are importing them, putting their own brand on them, like CS.
Right.
They're importing those Chinese radios and putting their own brand on them. But if you go to those websites, you're actually going to find that cheaper radio under $100. Phase 1, which is DPMR
446.
DPMR 446, that's the one we use in Europe. I go to Europe, we take two of those radios, I can use it anywhere in the continent. I'm perfectly legal. They're down, they're still around 150, 160, because there's not that many of them yet out there. I think there's only 3 manufacturers making them at this point. Also, you can get with 12.5 simulated, what we call simulated narrowband, which what it is they take a 12.5 and they use time slots on them. And two operators can use that same frequency and not hear each other, because one radio listens to one time slot. In an exaggerated method, it would be like I'm saying to you, hello, how are you doing? I'm doing great. How's your world? Back and forth. The radio's doing it much faster, but you don't hear each other, but it does allow for that. If that'll be that's currently where we're at, and that's technology that's nothing new. That's old technology picked up from the cell phone companies from probably about 35 years ago. So it's old technology brought into 12.5. It was good, it works. Cell phones use it all along. They've been using it all along. Difference now, we went to 6.25. Better efficiency, first of all, of 12. In the same footprint, now you can get 4 standalone individual repeaters. It's more costly, but all your eggs are not in one basket. If you lose one repeater, you don't lose 2 communications channels. You only lose 1. In an emergency, that could be a big deal. you lose one in an emergency and you've got two going out on it, you've just lost primary and secondary. With 6 1/4, you haven't. You've lost maybe primary, you shift your operations to secondary, that repeater's still up and running. Lightning strikes, rule, excluded. That takes out everything anyway. If the other thing is too, if the FCC does decide to enforce 6 1/2 true narrow banding, 6 1/4, and they still are up on the fence about it. They have not. They've come out. The last ruling I saw is they support currently the simulated 6 1/4, but they have not made a final ruling. They may still come out and say we want true 6 1/4. At that point, the manufacturers of 12 1/4 are going to be jumping up and down and throwing parties. Because think of all the equipment they just sold they get to replace. I worked for a big company that used to sell radio equipment. It has an M on their name. We had to churn our users to get them to buy new equipment. What meant we had to move you from VHF low, we had to move you to VHF high. Then I had to move you to UHF. Then I had to move you to T-band. Then I had to move you to 800. I didn't make money selling you a radio. I made money selling you transmitters, receivers, satellites. I made money that way. That's how I made my money. The salespeople had to go out and churn that company, churn the users, get them off their existing equipment. We had some fighters. California Highway Patrol is one of them.
City of Boston.
California Highway Patrol is still on 35 meg. They will not move. The reason is they have the mountains. We can't get the cost to cover every valley and every mountain versus putting Mount Diablo, a transmitter up there, Mount Bullion, several other mountains. Just put a low band transmitter up there, big footprint. But they wouldn't get pushed around. Plus they had hams who knew what they're doing. They didn't buy into the corporate thing of just churning the system. Now getting to ultra narrowband, again, it was a challenge. The processing, we didn't have the ability to sample at the speed. Look at computers nowadays, your laptops and everything are more powerful than went to space in Apollo, right? That's what I keep hearing. Most of our PDAs and cell phones just have more power in them than the computers that went to the moon. Now I do remember slide rules. I had to take a course on that. I'm wondering after 12 and 6 1/4, what's next? I don't know. At the rate we're going, we may be able to do 3 1/8. Down the road, we have that.
I have heard there's commercial companies that are doing 4 simultaneous conversations in that same time slot.
You can, yeah. Once you get the sampling rate up high enough, yeah, if you can get the speed up, the limiting factor is going to be how much data rate can you get over the air if you're in your bandwidth. That's going to be a limiting factor.
That and probably the quality of the vocoder. They're always advancing the vocoder as well. So.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that's come up too is the reliability, because a lot of the public safety users afford a lot of this stuff because of the reliability of the systems. They're concerned about all this backroom stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
how many eggs you want to put in one basket too? You lose one transmitter, now you've lost 4.
Yeah.
You've lost 4. You could lose your med. You wouldn't like to lose your police, fire, and medical just because one transmitter went down.
Right.
I mean, it makes a great sale point to get the radio in cheap. Wow, you can replace 4 big expensive units with one cheap unit. But that unit goes down. I don't want to be in that representative.
Not only that, but even the DMR, the issue of not having voting until recently has been an issue with the public safety users. It's almost like in Metro Boston, it's hard to find a department that isn't using active voting anymore. There's 1 or 2 that fought the trend to go forward and continue to be stupid, but most departments have voted. So now that Motorola and a couple other companies are offering voting to cover in building issues, in building penetration, that's become a big issue.
Yeah. We have the, one of the things now, when you can do networking general overall, before you jump in, network your computers, your repeaters, I do both sides. Why do you want to do it? Make sure you are ready to take on doing networking your repeaters. It is not something you do easily. It's quite an investment when you get into it. Do you really need, and first of all, if you're going to be putting up, do you need a network computer in your neighborhood? Some areas we have people who hog frequencies, and they collect frequencies, and they collect them, they put them on a network, and no one uses the network, and they just go off in the corner and stroke their ego because they got all these frequencies. That's all, and they're dead. So the hams have changed. The ham world has changed. Right now, the ARL last published was 700,000, right? I think that's the number they're throwing out right now as a number of licensed hams in the U.S. The ARL membership is about 160,000. Where are all the rest? They're not there. Your repeaters that used to be packed with people aren't anymore. I remember 20 years ago, you got a repeater. Every club had their own repeater, was packed. I don't know if you remember that. Some of you may not remember that, but it used to be packed every day. Nowadays, networking kicks in because to get usage, you may have to spread your footprint. On the network we're using now, the common users are in Montana, Florida, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. Common, every day. Those are the people that used to all live in one town, but are now scattered. So a big footprint does have that advantage of starting to get the hams back together. Some people may not like that. You may find resistance in your neighborhood for networking. Some people want to just talk to their buddy next door, and that's it. That's great. Do that. That's what Simplex was designed for. Work it, Do that 2-watt, 12-pole directional antenna and work that person. But no, you may find you're going to need a mixture of repeaters that are not networked and repeaters that are, where users can say, okay, if I go to this one, I'm just going to talk to my buddies if they're awake, if they got up at 9 o'clock in the morning, or I'm going to go to this one where I am going to go across the country. So look at whether or not you really need to address that issue. Do you really need a network repeater system in your area? If you do networking, how reliable is it going to be? If power goes down, will your site stay up? Now that gives you a question, are you going to be public safety minded? Or are you going to be purely hobby? If you're purely hobby, you don't care. If the site goes down, who cares? But how are you going to network? If you're going to network to another computer, are you ready to put in the 2.4, 5.4, 5.8, or the 900 link to get to the next byte or internet? Cell phone is good, but cell phones will not survive in a disaster. I've been through Loma Prieta earthquake and several others, and I was physically there. First thing to go down is the cell phone. First thing, where we are at Block Island, there's a tower there, cell phone tower on Block Island. It only has X number of transponders on it. When they get clogged, we get no service. Bottom line, no service available. During any emergency, the first thing that happens is one kid gets on their cell phone and calls the kid next door to him and says, did you hear, see, or feel that? Right? I've just lost 2 transponders on my cell phone site at that moment. I lost the one they're going in on, and I lost the one they're coming out. Well, I'm limited to 64 transponders. I'm 62 now. How many high school kids have cell phones who are going to tie up your network? Cell phone network. Cell phone networks always crash. They're not reliable. You do not want to bet anything on them if you are using them for any sort of reliability. You don't believe that?
Look at the marathon bombing. Within moments, nobody could get calls in and out because it clogged right off and went down.
And the second thing we found, too, unfortunately, the first thing the hams did during that emergency, guess what? They go home to see how their family's doing. They don't care about that radio. Let someone else do it. They all want to go home and see how their family's in an emergency. They're not going to go to operate a radio. They're going to go home and make sure their wife and kids are okay. After everything calm at home, maybe then they'll come out of the woodwork and start helping. But we found that issue there too. And that's human nature. Only people who responded were the people who are on the clock, who were being paid to go. You got a fireman, they had no respect. Go. They're on the clock.
Even that you couldn't be. Look
Yeah.
at Katrina. The
Yeah.
first day, a lot of cops and firemen went home
Exactly.
first.
To see how their families were
Yeah.
doing. Yeah, there's some issues there. But so during a big emergency, you may find that the person handling the traffic is, let's go back to Katrina, you may find the person handling network traffic sitting in Chicago. Because that person has no interest in what's going on down there. That ham in Chicago is not emotionally involved in your area. they can handle the traffic while you're at home checking on your dog. That's where it's happening. That's where it's going nowadays. So that's one of the advantages of having a network, and consider having off-site network management. That is having, if you're doing training for a disaster in Boston, you should have someone in Chicago involved on your network. Get them familiar, because if there is a true disaster, like Katrina said, you're probably going to go home, check up on your family. All that knowledge in your head is going to go with you. And unless you've got that person in Chicago trained to come in on the network, you're stumped. It sounds good on paper what you got, but in reality, it doesn't work. Sorry. Also, make sure if you go up, you should, from what we see in New England, if you're going to put a repeater system up networking, make sure you're at least good for 2 to 3 days off the grid. During the last blizzard, we had sites down for a week easily. We had storms coming through, just came through Rhode Island last week, took people down for 3 days. And those are just downcells. If your power feed just happens to be the one that tree goes across, and tell you right now, your site is somewhere near woods or something like that, right? Tree goes down, takes down your power line. Unless there's someone critical with you, guess what your priority is as far as the power company is concerned, getting you restored? Yeah, you're down there somewhere. Because they're going to get the trees all across the street, they're going to get the neighborhoods up first, the hospital, whoever. One individual user is down.
Yeah, just a small note now, the towns have a lot of say in that with the power company, and obviously the hospitals and the public safety facilities are always first on the list. The power company kind of takes the lead, and at least in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
The power companies, because they've been in so much trouble with the state the last few years, have been forced to now let the towns make decisions about that. It doesn't make them real happy, but they are following the lead.
But they will step in. Once they get through that, then the power company's going to prioritize by the maximum buck. You send a crew out.
Right.
Can they fix one street and restore 100 customers? Can they fix one spot and restore 100? Or should they send that crew out to fix one ham repeater? Yeah, they have to prioritize. They're in a business. They have to keep their image up. They got 100 people approving their rate increase versus one ham approving their rate increase. It's follow the money, folks. That's where it goes. Now, we talk about different ways to network. Some of the ways we network. First, digital, where we took one radio back-to-back, another radio back-to-back in digital mode. That's probably the best way. That has the best audio quality. We've been experimenting with it ourselves. We found digital. If you're going to do that, always try to do digital. Remember, it's all about audio quality, nothing else. Because when you're out there, when was the last time someone asked you, how's your specs on your radio? What's the first thing you always say? Oh, you sound great, right? Boy, that little bovine unit, that sounds great. Right? How many times have you heard that? People don't give a rip about what the technology is. They just want it to sound good. You know, some companies have caught on to that. Other companies haven't yet. They just want it to sound good, you know. Over-the-air linking the other way we can do over-the-air linking is you have one machine receives a signal. You see it done quite often on VHF, retransmits on UHF to another site. Done every way today in the analog world. We also tried in Rhode Island, Mass, digital to analog, back to digital. Did not work that well because what we found is the encoding rate, when it went back to analog and then tried to be re-encoded, it just didn't sample it right. And it got very tinny. So the audio quality wasn't there. We can do it with audio processors, but at that point, you really want to make that investment. Okay? Let's see. Yeah, now, other thing to look at is, we're going to get into some bit, connecting repeaters over the internet. You have two ways of doing it, dynamic or static. I don't know if you're all familiar with those two, the different types of connections. A static IP is like your home address at home. You live there. Anytime you send traffic, email to him, I will send it to him. Boom, I know static address. The domain name servers are kind of like the post office. They sit there and they know where everyone lives. So when you come in with an IP number, they send it over and send it to you. Now, as an IP provider, I provide that person with a static IP address. I will never change it because I went to CINA and grabbed a whole block of IP numbers and they're mine, and I'm gonna make money off of selling that to him. Dynamic, if a home user, what I'll do is periodically, I'm gonna change your IP address. You'll never notice it, because I know where you are constantly. I changed it, so I know who you are. Traffic comes to me for you, I look up my database and say, oh, here he is, out I go to him. As an IP provider, I will provide you at your house a static IP address if you want it for your repeaters. You can get provided static. It will cost you more money. But your internet providers will provide you static, usually under what they call a business package.
What's the advantage of static over dynamic?
Static address is fixed. I'll always be able to find you anywhere in the world.
And everybody else will too.
Anywhere else. I can ping you, and I know where I ping. If you have a static 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, I can ping that. If that's your machine, and I'm in China, I can ping that and see you're up on the air. I can see at least your machine's responding, so you have power to that machine. I can do network testing with that machine. I can test it. I can go out and see, is that site active or not? Do that in the computer side to check. Static IP gives you a lot more flexibility to bring in packages which require static. Now, the second way we do it was dynamic. There's a way around that. There's a company called DYN DNS. They're built into a lot of repeaters. The Icoms have them built into it now. I think some of the other companies do too.
Used to be free.
There is still a free service. I've got the free service.
Are they still doing
Yeah,
it?
we have
Yeah,
still
you have
the
to
free.
log in every 30 days
You
to
log in every
maintain
30
it,
days,
yeah.
So you set a little shell script up which logs you in every day, every 30 days, and you're done with it. So, but what they do is, imagine now you're traveling across the United States, and you want to still get your U.S. mail. So you tell your sister or brother where you're going. The post office sends all the mail now to your sister and brother. You call your sister and brother and say, I'm in Montana. Send me my mail here in Bismarck. Your brother and sister, your sister sells all your U.S. mail to Bismarck. Now you go down to Wyoming and you say, hey, I'm in Sinclair, Wyoming. Now they send all your there. Dynamic DNS does the same thing. What they do is they assign you a name, not an IP address, a name. So you may be bob.steve.com. All right, they already bought that name. They own that name. Now, when you set up your repeater, instead of putting an IP address in it for your ID, you put that name in. That name gets transmitted to DYDNS when your repeater comes to life. Inside that packet that came in is not only that name you put in there, but the IP address it originated from, which is the dynamic address that your IP provider currently gave you at that moment. It writes that IP address in its table. Now, any traffic coming in, it knows to send off there. Your home router will take it from there, because your home router knows who you are. But that now, if the IP address changes, they change his IP address, the next packet that comes in from his house will have a new IP address. It'll still say bob.steve.com, but it'll have a new IP address. I changed my table. For DYDNS to work best, or any dynamic, you need to point your routers at their servers, not Google. Go to their name servers, because they keep the tables first. Google will get it, as it takes usually 12 hours for domain name servers to filter out to the whole world. But if you're using repeater A and you want to talk to repeater B over dynamic DNS, you should both be pointed to the same name server if you're using DYDNS. If you're not, if you're using DYDNS and using Mad Dog DNS, in your router tables, you'll notice when you fill in your DNS, you can put in 3 fields, right? Most of them allow you to put in primary and a secondary DNS. DYDNS is primary, Mad Dog is second. If you can't find it there, go find it here. Search those 2 first before you go out to the rest of the world. Build it up that way. I've been using DYDNS now on a computer network, on radio network for a repeater for about 6 to 8 months at least now. No problems. They just updates itself constantly where it is. So it does work. We talked about DNS. In the repeater world, right now, the Icoms, Kenwoods, I don't know about the other manufacturers, they're using something called a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if everybody's heard of that. It's a little box computer. It runs this, I can get it for like $39 now, something like that. Matter of fact, they've imported Windows to it now, if I understand. Windows 10 is now.
10 is on it?
Yeah, it's been ported to a Raspberry Pi, and it's free. And it's free. Microsoft's got the word, hey, we better get back out there. We're losing too much. We're losing too big a database. But Windows 10 is now currently free for the Raspberry Pi. The caveat is you got to have Windows 10 on at least one machine because it downloads some executables. But the Raspberry Pi, what that does is your repeater is pointed to the Raspberry Pi. It's in your house. It's a static machine on your repeater pointed to your Raspberry Pi. Your Raspberry Pi now goes out to a server and does the same thing DYDNS does. Here I am. Here's my current IP address. You got any traffic for me? Yes, you do. I'll take it. I'll send it back to the repeater. That's all they're doing. It's a simple little script. It's a public domain script. You can get it off download it off the internet. But as far as connecting, that's all the Raspberry Pi does. It's just its job is strictly, here I am. Here's my current IP address. You got anything for me? Now, some of the stuff here now we're talking about is unique to NXDN market. Some of it is similar. I know Motorola people may know if it works on Turbo 2, but what we do is we send RANs out. RAN is like a high-level CTCSS. We send that over the network. When we receive a RAN in a repeater, our repeater decides whether that traffic is to go out locally over the network or not. If we open that random access or radio access number, we open that in a table. If it matches, not only will we rebroadcast that, it'll put it on the network.